Welcome back, everybody, to another historical deep dive here on the GothamChess YouTube channel. Today, we are covering arguably one of the most famous chess games ever played. Now, whether or not you've seen it, this game is used in countless classrooms. It's got a lot of incredible themes, and the protagonist of this game is none other than American superstar Paul Morphy. The year is 1858, Paul Morphy is 21 years of age, and the game is being played in Paris as Paul Morphy was invited as a guest of Duke Karl and his count. As part of an opera. I believe they were seeing Norma, but I wasn't there, and there are no text messages that I can send to the afterlife to confirm this, but there are many reports on many websites about this game. Now, this game is actually, it's quite breathtaking, it's quite interesting. If you're a beginner, you'll learn something. If you've already seen the game, well, hopefully I'll kind of refresh your memory and maybe give you some kind of inspiration from this game all the same. So Paul Morphy begins the game with e4. We have e5, knight to f3. Very normal stuff thus far, developing. Knight comes out into the center and attacks this pawn. Nowadays, it is far more common in this position than the move played in the game to play the move knight to c6, defending this pawn. Or you can respond with knight to f6, counterattacking the pawn in the center. But back in the day, they liked to play d6. Now, this is obviously not a bad move. This is known as the Philidor defense, but it has a drawback, and the drawback is that the dark squared bishop is now blocked in. White at this point can continue developing pieces to the middle, but as one of the main ways of playing a king's pawn with a king's knight opening, if you can put two pawns in the center, you should, and Paul Morphy plays the move d2 to d4. All the while, he is looking behind him to continue to watch the opera rather than play the game. The story, legend goes that Duke Karl and Count Isouard wanted to play during the opera, which kind of seems like degenerate behavior, frankly, because why wouldn't you just play before, or why wouldn't you just play after? But that's neither here nor there. But if my friends invited me to a movie and tried to play chess, I'd probably smack them. But bishop g4 now, played by the two. Bishop g4 is developing a piece and pinning. That's known as a pin. The knight cannot move without the queen being lost, and that kind of alleviates a little bit of pressure here to the e5 square. But it is far more practical to take on d4, and again, that is the modern move, but these players didn't know this 158 years ago, or whatever, I tried to do mental math on the fly there, and that absolutely failed. It's definitely not 158, 163? Anyway, this is why I make chess videos and don't make math videos. So pawn takes d4 is significantly more common nowadays, but bishop g4 was played, and here Paul Morphy took on e5. Why did he take on e5? Well, this move forces Duke Karl and his count to play bishop takes here, because if they did not, then you can take the queen, you see? And when you take the queen, a couple of things happen. First of all, black surrenders the right to castle, but furthermore, the knight can now take the free pawn in the center, simultaneously attacking two things. Now, if the bishop goes back and protects that pawn, okay, you at least don't lose this, but you've lost the pawn, you've lost the right to castle, and most likely you will lose precious watch time of this opera that you're sitting and viewing. So bishop takes f3 was played first, and Paul Morphy took back, and now pawn takes e5. And, you know, the prompt that I've given to my students, all my scholastic students who have shown this game, at this point I start asking little questions. And if you'd like to pause the video, feel free to kind of go along. I'm not just going to show the game. We'll also have a mini lesson. White to move, create the most fatal threat possible. Okay, so feel free to pause and go ahead. You know, you can create a lot of threats in this position. You can look at things that are unguarded and find ways to attack them, like queen to g3, queen to b3, for example. But there's a move here that I said most fatal, and that move would be bishop to c4. This move very naturally develops a bishop and continues to mobilize development. Now white has two pieces out versus black's 0 pieces, and you are threatening queen takes pawn, which would be checkmate. There's a few ways to defend this mate, but Duke Karl and his count play the move knight to f6. This is known as interposing defense, because now the queen can obviously not jump over the knight. The knight is blocking the path of the queen, and it is sufficiently protected away from this queen. However, here, rather than just lazily castling or developing something or going like this, Paul Morphy breaks standard opening protocol. He moves a piece for a second time, despite not having all of his development completed, because he finds a nice geometric way to sync up both of his pieces. He finds something that's not guarded, and he finds the f7 pawn, and he plays queen to b3, which is very strange move for probably people below about 1200. If I had to give an arbitrary number, because it's just so non-standard to rotate the queen and see in both directions. Many people here would just kind of finish their development, but we're talking about, you know, greatest player of that generation, so he plays queen to b3. Now, if I asked you which of these two pawns is more important to defend, you would say, correct, you would say obviously the pawn near the king, right? Because that other pawn, okay, there's a rook over there, but my king is more important. And, you know, if you block this, I'm going to take you, and then I'm going to bring in my queen, and it's mate. That is not how the opera game ended. That would be far less dramatic. So, you know, they guarded their pawn like this. They guarded this pawn with the queen, and their logic was that if he takes my b7 pawn, if Paul Morphy takes this pawn and goes for my rook, I have a very nice move here. And this is a concept known as danger levels. My longtime viewers will know I love this term. What's worth more than a rook? A queen, a king, and you. You're worth more than a rook. And in this case, the black queen and bishop would go here. This move disallows white from taking the rook because the queen simultaneously hits the two most valuable pieces in white's position and is defended. That would force a queen trade. And even though Paul Morphy would kind of end up a pawn, that's not good enough. And Paul Morphy was not a scientist. He was an artist. He was not he was not looking for one pawn strategic advantage. He wanted to knock out these two dudes immediately so he could go back to watching the performance that he traveled thousands of miles to see. Okay? So he was not in the mood for a long strategic game. He played the move knight to c3. This blocks the check, and now queen takes b7 is rethreatened, and black plays the move c6, defending the pawn with the queen. At this point, you need to continue your development. And rather than castling, Morphy decides that the best move is bishop to g5. Why? Because we have another pin. This queen and bishop combo is called a battery. And he is also maintaining flexibility of which way he wants to castle. Bishop g5 is a little bit more challenging than short castle, because even though castling is good, the move bishop g5 actually legitimately applies pressure to the black position. And here black makes a fatal error. Black is already actually very restricted because the queen is blocking the bishop. The knight cannot move. Probably what black should do here is move out of the pin and try to develop the dark squared bishop. But of course, white has an overwhelming lead in development. Instead, black tries to fight. And when the move b5 occurs, it attacks the bishop. And, you know, some of us would go, well, I can't go there because I get taken, so I'm just going to retreat. And that is why you are you and Paul Morphy is Paul Morphy. Because in this position, Paul Morphy says, hey, I have 4 attacking pieces, and after the move b5, all I need to do is castle. I will have a 5th one. And they don't have a lot. They haven't moved anything. So what if I take? What if instead of retreating, I sacrifice? And his idea is that after c takes b5, bishop takes b5 check, it is not easy to stop this attack. Your options: move this knight, lose your queen. Move your king into the middle and absorb a belligerent attack. Or block like this. So cocooning, now you are dealing with 2 pins. One is absolute, one is not absolute. This is an absolute pin. You cannot move the knight at all. This is not absolute because you can lose your queen. I mean, you're allowed to lose your queen. It's a bad move, but, you know, some people have made a career on it, and they've got a, you know, gambit named after them for it. So knight d7 is played, and now if I ask you which way should you castle, you would of course say, very good, of course long castle. Because now you at least have a rook laser beaming this knight, right? And even though Paul Morphy is down 1 point of material, if you actually count the utility of the position, which of his pieces are out and about? 4. Bishop, bishop, rook, queen. Black is cocooning. I mean, nothing can move here, right? As evidenced by this next move, defending the knight from further pressure. Like, literally, I mean, this is turtling. You're looking out to see if anything can happen. Black needs at least 2 or 3 moves here to kind of untangle and try to get back into the game. And, well, Paul Morphy just doesn't let you wait. If I asked you in this position, what should you do? Like, what should you do if you're playing with white? Maybe you look around, you go, I got this, and I got this, and, you know, if I'm looking at this position, this knight's not actually guarding that knight, because, right? Pin, okay, so maybe a little queen a4 action. Let me get a little bit of maybe double my rooks. Double my rooks is what that's called. Up, over. No. You have to look at the most forcing moves first. And in chess, the most forcing moves are the ones that make your opponent react. I'll give you an example. This move is not forcing. Doesn't make your opponent react. But checks and captures, in that order, make your opponent react. For example, bishop takes, I have to react because it's a check. Rook takes, I don't have to react, but I probably should, because the bishop is still lingering. And, well, that's exactly what Paul Morphy did. He took this way. He did not take this way. Because while it is nice to remove the guard, it's not the right guard to remove. he just goes directly to the epicenter of the action. And here's the problem. If black takes like this, you lose a queen. If black takes like this, you lose a queen. If black takes like this, it's illegal and you smack your opponent. Don't actually do that. I don't condone violence. Rook takes rook is the only move. The problem is you've lost a coating of defense for your king, and I still haven't moved one of my most important pieces. And what piece is that? Yes, like this. Don't cash out of the casino just yet. This bishop is worth far more than this rook. This bishop is powerful. This rook can't move, okay? Like, it's just standing there waiting to be obliterated. And now we have a very serious problem. The problem is that Paul Morphy is threatening to take. You cannot take with the king, the queen, or the knight. You will suffer devastating losses of material, no matter what you take with. So, well, they were like, well, Paul's most powerful attacking piece is his queen. So, of course, we should play queen e6. Because now you can trade the queen. For example, if you were to take, and then say, hey, this rook is guarded by this knight, take, okay, and now I'm gonna take. You know, the funny thing is, he's still completely winning. I mean, it's rook and bishop versus rook and bishop, but he's dominant. I mean, he's just absolutely dominant position here, right? Even that would have been good for Paul Morphy, but Paul Morphy was not a scientist, he was an artist. And after queen to e6, he realized that it wasn't his queen that was his most powerful weapon in this position. It was his rook. And feel free to pause here and find the best move for white, the best combination. It's one of the most iconic knockout combinations in chess. Starting with the most forcing move in chess, which is a check. And I will now show it to you. Bishop takes d7. The idea of playing queen to e6 is that now by moving the pin, a queen out of this pin, you can take with the knight. And it seems you've solved your problems. Your next move is pawn to f6, repelling the bishop. Maybe you're going to trade queens and then play pawn to f6, I should say, otherwise you lose the queen. And then you're very happy. But here, do Karl and his count, despite focusing fully on this game and completely not on the spectacular performance that was going on behind them because they were in a private booth, completely negated to analyze the move queen to b8, which just looks completely illegal. But that's why Paul Morphy is Paul Morphy. And these two bozos are these two bozos. Queen to b8 check. The beautiful knockout punch, because now the king cannot move anywhere. The knight has to take. And remember, I told you the most powerful attacking piece was actually the rook. Well, you can argue it was the bishop. I mean, who doesn't need a supporting cast, right? But rook to d8. A beautiful mate. Absolutely beautiful mate. The conclusion of the historic 1858 opera game. A game with a lot of interesting principles. Actually, if you really go through this game, it's not just about the flashiness and, you know, Paul Morphy and the whole story. It's a lot of, you know, interesting layers of this game. I'll just recap them for you. Taking the center in 2 pawns. Bishop g4 being inaccurate. In fact, in general, you should probably take in the center early and then commit your pieces. One more thing is don't get the bishops out and trade them off so quickly. Because the thing is, as the board opens up, you've been presented with the light-squared bishop so early. And now your light-squared bishop comes alive. It has no counterpart. You cannot give away bishops so early in the game unless you keep the position closed. So it's better to develop your knights early than bishops. And for white, it's immediately important to counterbalance the desire to just naturally develop your pieces with actually posing your opponent serious dangers in the opening, right? And that's what Paul Morphy did. Not taking material in view of wanting to keep more pieces on the board and potentially long-lasting attacking effects, right? And then ultimately not overextending, not opening the board to such an extent when your king is still in the middle, even at the cost of material. And if you're ever looking to sacrifice a piece for 2 pawns, make sure you have a concrete follow-up. If it's very easy for your opponent to get their king out of danger, for example, it's probably not good. But in this case, it was not easy. And there were many, many more layers to the attack that ultimately culminated in a beautiful sacrifice and another beautiful sacrifice and checkmate. So I wanted to show this game. There's many videos of it out on YouTube, but if you were able to stumble 14.5 minutes into my video, I do want to show you my appreciation. You know, it's a 17-move game from 1858, okay? And ladies and gentlemen, the reality of the situation is, back in 1858, I have no clue how these games even made it, like, into chessgames.com. Think about that. They didn't put this on pen and paper. They played the game, and then somehow it got submitted. Like, how? How did it make... Did Paul Morphy just go back to the States like, hey, dudes, look how I smoked these bozos while they were, you know, I was watching this. I wasn't even looking at the board. They were just saying their move. I don't know. But What I do know is Paul Morphy was an absolutely brilliant player. And this game I have used to many effect to show opening principles, the good and the bad of the opening, the way you should play the opening, and all sorts of different tactics. Double attacks, long castling, many different types of pins and sacrifices and not leaving your king in the center, and obviously the amazing checkmate pattern at the end. So thank you for making it to the end of this video. And if there's any other historical games that you want me to cover, however simple they are or complex or sagas, do let me know in the comments below. If you're new to the channel, welcome if this is the first video, first few videos that you've seen of mine. I have a lot of playlists on all elements of chess, and if you are a longtime viewer, you already know the drill. I very much appreciate you. Thank you for supporting my content, and I will see you in the next video.